When a wealthy, entitled diner publicly humiliates a young black waiter at an upscale restaurant, the quiet owner steps in with a calm yet powerful lesson in respect and dignity. What unfolds next leaves the entire room speechless and forever changed. The warm glow of pendant lights reflected off the polished hardwood floors of Morgan's Bistro, one of Atlanta's most exclusive dining spots. The restaurant was alive with the energy of a bustling evening, as waitstaff navigated between elegantly set tables, balancing trays of gourmet dishes. Soft jazz played in the background, blending harmoniously with the murmur of conversation and the occasional clink of glasses. At a table near the center of the room sat Vanessa St. Clair, a well-dressed woman in her early 40s, accompanied by two equally sophisticated friends. Vanessa exuded an air of entitlement. Her tailored cream-colored suit complemented the glint of her gold bracelet, and her manicured nails tapped impatiently on the tablecloth as she sipped from a crystal glass of sparkling water. She scanned the room with critical eyes, taking in the decor and the other patrons, a faint smirk playing on her lips. "This place is decent," she said, her voice carrying just enough volume for those nearby to catch. "But they could use an update on their lighting. Don't you think, Lisa?" Her friend Lisa nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, Vanessa. And the floral arrangement on that table. It's almost as though they got it from a grocery store." Their laughter, light but pointed, seemed to float above the subdued atmosphere of the bistro. In the corner of the restaurant, Malik Evans, a young black man in his early 20s, adjusted his boatie and straightened his black vest. Despite the long hours and a double shift, he carried himself with quiet professionalism. Malik had been working at Morgan's Bistro for almost a year, saving every penny to fund his final semester of college. The bistro wasn't just a job, it was a lifeline, a step toward his dream of becoming a lawyer. Tonight, however, the fatigue was beginning to show. His steps, though deliberate, felt heavier, and the smile he wore had become a practiced mask. Malik had learned to stay calm under pressure, but the endless demands of wealthy patrons often tested his resolve. "Table 12 needs their entree," the head waiter called, snapping Malik back to the present. He glanced at the tray, carefully balanced the plated dishes, and made his way toward the center of the room, toward Vanessa's table. "Ladies," Malik began as he approached, his voice even and professional, "here are your entrees. I hope you enjoy your meal." He placed the plates in front of them with practiced precision, ensuring the presentation was flawless. Vanessa, however, immediately frowned, tilting her head as she inspected the filet mignon before her. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the ambient jazz. "Is this supposed to be medium rare? Because it looks closer to medium well." Malik blinked, taken aback but careful to maintain his composure. "I'm sorry, Mom," he replied. "Let me take that back to the kitchen and have it redone for you." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed. "You should be sorry," she said with a sigh. "We've been waiting forever. And now this. Honestly, how hard is it to get an order right?" Her friends exchanged amused glances, stifling laughter behind their hands. Malik's cheeks flushed, but he kept his expression neutral. "I'll take care of it right away," he said, reaching for the plate. As Malik turned to walk away, Vanessa's voice rang out again, loud enough for nearby diners to hear. "Unbelievable," she muttered, her lips curling into a smirk. "They'll hire anyone these days, won't they?" The comment stung, but Malik refused to react. He tightened his grip on the plate and continued toward the kitchen. Behind him, Vanessa's friends giggled, and one of them chimed in, "Maybe he's new. Or just not cut out for this kind of work." Vanessa shrugged dramatically. "If you can't carry a plate and get an order right, you're in the wrong job. Maybe flipping burgers would be a better fit." Her voice carried, drawing uncomfortable glances from nearby tables. A couple sitting a few feet away exchanged a look of disapproval, their brows furrowing at Vanessa's behavior. Across the room, Malik noticed these reactions but didn't pause. He pushed through the kitchen doors, his face burning with a mix of anger and humiliation. Unbeknownst to Vanessa, one patron had been quietly observing the entire interaction. James Carter, the owner of Morgan's Bistro, sat at a corner table near the bar. He was dressed modestly in a light blue shirt and gray slacks, his demeanor calm and unassuming. James often dined at his own restaurant, preferring to stay in the background to ensure everything ran smoothly. Tonight, however, his focus had shifted. He had noticed Vanessa the moment she arrived, her commanding presence hard to miss. But it wasn't until her treatment of Malik that James's attention sharpened. His gaze followed her movements, his expression impassive but his mind clearly turning. James set down his glass of water and leaned slightly toward the bar, gesturing for the manager. They spoke in hushed tones, James's voice steady and deliberate. The manager nodded, his face tightening with a mix of understanding and concern. Back at her table, Vanessa continued to hold court, oblivious to the growing discomfort of those around her. "Honestly," she said, taking a sip of her wine, "I don't know why they bother with all this pretense if they can't even hire competent staff." Her friend Lisa chimed in, "Maybe we should leave a note on the check. You know, as a favor to help them improve." Vanessa laughed, her diamond earrings catching the light. "Oh, I'll do more than that. I'm tempted to call the manager myself. They need to know what kind of embarrassment they're hiring." The atmosphere in the bistro had shifted. Whispers rippled through the diners, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others avoiding Vanessa's gaze altogether. The couple who had exchanged glances earlier now looked visibly annoyed, their meal interrupted by the ongoing spectacle. At the far end of the room, James rose from his seat, his movements deliberate and calm. The time had come to intervene. Malik pushed through the kitchen doors, his hands trembling slightly as he placed the plate on the counter. The head chef, a seasoned woman named Chef Maria, glanced up from her station, her brows furrowing when she saw his expression. "What happened, Malik?" Maria asked, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached. Malik exhaled sharply, his composure slipping just enough to let frustration show. "Table 12, he said, his voice low. The fillet wasn't cooked to her liking. She wasn't exactly polite about it." Maria's lips thinned into a line, and she shook her head knowingly. "Vanessa St. Clair?" she asked, her voice tinged with annoyance. "She's been here before. Always a critic, no matter how perfect the dish." Malik nodded. "It's not just the food." She made it personal. Loud enough for the whole room to hear. Maria sighed, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Take a breath. You're doing great. Let me fix this, and we'll get it back out there." "Thanks," Malik said, his voice soft but grateful. He leaned against the counter for a moment, steadying himself. He wasn't new to rude customers, but this felt different, sharper, more deliberate. Out in the dining area, Vanessa continued her loud critique. The room had grown quieter, her voice cutting through the soft jazz like a discordant note. "Honestly," Vanessa said, swirling the wine in her glass, "if this place wants to call itself high-end, they need to rethink their staff. It's not just about the food. Presentation matters. Attitude matters, and that boy, he's clearly not ready for this level." Her friends laughed nervously, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Even they seemed uncomfortable now, sensing the growing disapproval from other diners. At a nearby table, an older woman whispered to her companion, "Does she realize how she sounds?" The couple from earlier exchanged another glance. This time, the man leaned forward, his voice just loud enough to carry. "Some people don't realize respect is a two-way street." Vanessa shot them a quick glance, her eyes narrowing. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone clipped. The man met her gaze evenly. "Not with the food or the staff," he said simply, then returned to his meal. His wife placed a hand on his arm, her lips twitching in a faint, approving smile. Vanessa bristled but didn't respond. Instead, she turned her attention back to her friends, who were now avoiding eye contact. From his corner table, James Carter observed the scene quietly. He had spent years building Morgan's Bistro into a sanctuary of good food and genuine hospitality. Moments like this where entitlement threatened to overshadow the hard work of his team struck a nerve. James rose from his seat, straightening his shirt sleeves as he approached the bar. The restaurant manager, Elijah, noticed him coming and stepped forward, his expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Mr. Carter," Elijah began, "I've been keeping an eye on table 12. Should I step in?" James nodded slightly. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But I'll need you to prepare something special." Elijah raised an eyebrow but didn't question him. James leaned in, speaking in a low voice. As the manager nodded and moved toward the kitchen, James turned back toward the dining area, his expression unreadable. With the newly prepared filet in hand, Malik emerged from the kitchen, his steps measured. He approached Vanessa's table, setting the plate down with deliberate care. "Here you are, Malik said, his voice steady. "I had the chef remake your entree. I hope it meets your expectations." Vanessa glanced at the plate, then back at Malik, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "I suppose it will do," she said, her tone dismissive. "But next time, try to get it right the first time. And for heaven's sake, work on your posture. You represent this establishment after all." Malik's jaw tightened, but he simply nodded and stepped away. Behind him, Vanessa turned back to her friends, grinning. "It's amazing," she said loudly, "how some people think a forced smile is enough to earn a tip." This time the room didn't stay silent. A soft murmur rippled through the diners, their discomfort now palpable. Some exchanged glances, others shook their heads. At one table, a man leaned toward his wife and muttered, "She's embarrassing herself." Before Vanessa could continue, James approached the table, his calm demeanor instantly commanding attention. The room seemed to hold its breath as he stopped just short of Vanessa's chair. "Good evening," James said, his voice warm but firm. "I hope you're enjoying your experience at Morgan's Bistro." Vanessa looked up, startled by his sudden presence. "Oh well," she began, recovering quickly. "It's been fine. But I have to say your staff could use some improvement." James tilted his head slightly, his smile unwavering. "I see," he said. "And is there anything specific you'd like to address?" Vanessa straightened, clearly relishing the attention. "For starters, your server Malik, I believe, needs proper training. He's clumsy, slow, and frankly unprofessional. A place like this demands better." James nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for your feedback," he said. Then, gesturing toward a nearby server holding a tray, he added, "Would you mind if I shared some feedback of my own?" Vanessa blinked, taken aback. "Excuse me?" James's expression remained steady. "You see, I've been observing your evening. And while we always strive to provide exceptional service, I believe respect is a two-way exchange. Malik is one of the hardest working individuals on my team. If there was an issue with your meal, it could have been resolved with kindness." Vanessa's smile faltered. "I didn't mean any harm," she said, her voice less certain now. James raised an eyebrow. "Intent doesn't erase impact. Words carry weight, Mrs. St. Clair. And in my restaurant, we value not only the quality of our food, but also the dignity of the people who make it possible." The room was utterly silent. Diners watched with rapt attention, the quiet hum of jazz now the only sound. Vanessa's smile froze, her polished exterior cracking under the weight of James Carter's calm but firm words. Her friends, who had been laughing moments ago, now sat in uneasy silence, avoiding eye contact with both Vanessa and the other diners. The room remained quiet, every pair of eyes fixed on the scene unfolding at the center table. James's posture was relaxed, his hands resting lightly in front of him, but his presence was anything but passive. His words weren't loud, yet they carried the weight of authority, reverberating through the bistro like a quiet storm. "Mrs. St. Clair," James began, his voice steady, "I built Morgan's Bistro on a simple foundation: respect. Respect for the craft, respect for the food, and most importantly, respect for the people who make this establishment possible. Malik is a reflection of that ethos. He's diligent, professional, and resilient. And tonight, he showed far more grace under pressure than most people would." Vanessa shifted in her seat, her cheeks tinged with an embarrassed flush. "I wasn't trying to," she started, but James raised a hand, silencing her gently. "Intent and impact are two very different things," he said. "Your intent may not have been to humiliate or belittle him, but the impact of your words and actions says otherwise. Words, Mrs. St. Clair, carry power, and when wielded carelessly they can do harm." James turned slightly, nodding toward the manager, Elijah, who stepped forward holding a silver tray. On it sat an unopened bottle of champagne in an envelope. The murmurs among the diners grew louder as they tried to guess what was happening. "This," James said, gesturing to the tray, "was meant to be a gesture of goodwill, a way to thank you for dining with us tonight. But I've decided to redirect its purpose." Vanessa furrowed her brow, glancing between the tray and James. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. James picked up the envelope and set it in front of her. "Instead of complimentary champagne, I've chosen to donate the value of this bottle and your entire bill to a local organization that supports young professionals like Malik. This organization provides scholarships and mentorship opportunities for those striving to build better futures, despite facing adversity. The announcement was met with a ripple of applause from nearby tables. Some diners nodded in approval, while others leaned closer to their companions, whispering in admiration. Vanessa's friends exchanged awkward glances, their earlier smirks now replaced by sheepish expressions. Vanessa stared at the envelope, her hands fidgeting with the stem of her wine glass. "That's generous," she said, though her tone lacked conviction. James tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Generosity isn't the point, Mrs. St. Clair. Accountability is. This isn't about shaming you, it's about encouraging reflection. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? How do you want to be remembered by those you encounter, even in passing?" Around the restaurant, the atmosphere had shifted. What had begun as a typical evening of fine dining had transformed into something far more profound. Diners sat a little straighter, their expressions contemplative. A young couple at the back table exchanged nods of approval, and the older gentleman from earlier raised his glass subtly in James's direction. At Vanessa's table, the tension was palpable. Lisa, her closest friend, finally broke the silence. "Vanessa," she said softly, maybe this is a chance to think about things differently." Vanessa shot her a look, but it lacked the sharpness of her earlier glares. She seemed lost, unsure of how to respond. Her polished exterior, so carefully constructed, was crumbling under the weight of collective judgment. James turned his attention to Malik, who had been standing near the kitchen door, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of disbelief and quiet gratitude. James gestured for him to come forward. "Malik," James said, his tone softening, "I want to commend you for your professionalism tonight. You've handled yourself with grace, even in the face of unfair treatment. That's no small feat." The applause grew louder, and this time it was directed at Malik. He hesitated, unsure of what to do, but James gave him a reassuring nod. Slowly, Malik stepped forward, his head held a little higher. "Thank you, sir," Malik said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. I just try to do my best." "And that's all anyone can ask," James replied. He turned back to the room, addressing the diners. "Let tonight serve as a reminder to us all. Kindness costs nothing, but its value is immeasurable. We never know what someone else is carrying, or how our words might affect them." Vanessa's friends began to gather their belongings, clearly eager to leave. Vanessa hesitated, glancing around the room. The weight of the moment hung heavily on her shoulders. For once, she had nothing to say. As she rose from her seat, she avoided meeting anyone's gaze. The confidence she had exuded earlier was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. At the door, she paused and glanced back at Malik. Their eyes met briefly, and though she didn't say a word, her expression seemed to carry an unspoken apology. James watched her leave, his face calm but thoughtful. He wasn't interested in gloating or basking in her discomfort. His focus remained on the larger message, creating a space where everyone, staff and diners alike, felt respected and valued. As the restaurant settled back into its usual rhythm, Malik returned to the kitchen, his steps lighter than before. The support he had received from James and the diners had lifted a burden he hadn't realized he was carrying. Elijah approached James at the bar. "Well handled, Mr. Carter," he said with a nod. "That's not something you see every day." James took a sip of his water, his expression reflective. "It's not about the spectacle, Elijah. It's about the message. If even one person walks out of here tonight thinking differently about how they treat others, then it was worth it." The evening at Morgan's Bistro slowly wound down, but the events at Vanessa's table lingered in the minds of everyone present. Malik returned to his duties, moving between tables with a newfound sense of confidence. His steps felt lighter, his shoulders straighter, as though the weight of the earlier humiliation had been lifted. The quiet murmurs of diners now carried a different tone, one of respect and admiration. From his corner table, James Carter watched Malik with a subtle smile. His actions tonight hadn't been about spectacle or making a point for the sake of it. They had been about reinforcing the values upon which he'd built Morgan's Bistro, a place where hard work and decency were celebrated, not exploited. As the restaurant emptied, Malik approached James, tray in hand. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice steady but still carrying a hint of hesitation, "can I talk to you for a second?" James gestured to the seat across from him. "Of course, Malik. Take a seat." Malik set the tray down and eased into the chair, his hands clasped together. I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for standing up for me, but for everything. You didn't have to do that. James leaned forward slightly, his expression kind but serious. Malik, let me tell you something. Running this restaurant isn't just about the food or the decor. It's about the people who make this place what it is. You're part of that. And when someone disrespects you, they're disrespecting everything we stand for here. Malik nodded, his eyes fixed on the table for a moment before meeting James's gaze. It's hard sometimes. People like Vanessa, they see me, and they assume I'm less than them. Like I'm just here to serve them, and nothing more. James's lips pressed into a thin line. I know exactly what you mean, he said, his voice low. I've been in your shoes, Malik. That's why I do what I do. To create a space where people like us, people who've had to fight for every step, are treated with dignity. The weight of James's words settled over the table. Malik nodded again, this time more firmly. Thank you, sir. I won't forget this. James smiled. Good. And remember, it's not just about how others treat you. It's about how you carry yourself. Tonight, you showed everyone in this room what professionalism looks like. Hold on to that. As the last diners left the restaurant, the couple who had quietly defended Malik earlier stopped by his station. The man extended his hand. Malik, right? He asked. Malik nodded, a bit surprised. Yes, sir. The man smiled warmly. You handled yourself incredibly well tonight. Just wanted to say that. His wife chimed in. We've been coming here for years, and we've always been impressed by how hard everyone here works. What happened tonight? That wasn't right. But you didn't let it get to you. That's something to be proud of. Malik shook the man's hand, his smile genuine. Thank you. That means a lot. As the couple walked out, Malik felt a swell of gratitude, not just for their kind words, but for the quiet solidarity they had shown during the evening. Meanwhile, outside the bistro, Vanessa lingered by the curb as her friends called for a car. She clutched her purse tightly, her earlier bravado replaced by an uncharacteristic silence. The events of the evening replayed in her mind: the disapproving stares, James's calm yet cutting words, and the applause for Malik. One of her friends, Lisa, placed a hand on her shoulder. Vanessa, she began cautiously, maybe tonight wasn't your best moment, but it doesn't have to define you. You can use it as a chance to grow. Vanessa looked at her friend, her expression conflicted. For the first time, she didn't respond with a snide remark or a dismissive laugh. Instead, she nodded faintly. Maybe you're right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The car arrived and Vanessa climbed in, her mind still heavy with the weight of the evening. She didn't know if she was ready to change, but something about James's words lingered in her thoughts. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind? As the staff began cleaning up, James walked over to where Malik was wiping down a table. Heading out soon? He asked. Malik nodded. Just finishing up here. James placed a hand on his shoulder. Before you go, remember this. Tonight wasn't just about standing up for you. It was about setting an example for everyone in that room. Kindness and respect, Malik. They're what make the difference. Malik smiled, his earlier exhaustion replaced by a sense of purpose. I'll remember that, sir. Thank you. As Malik left for the night, the staff exchanged small smiles and nods, the unspoken bond of shared respect stronger than ever. The restaurant, now quiet, seemed to carry the echoes of the evening, a reminder of the lessons learned and the values upheld. James lingered for a moment, looking out the window as the city lights reflected on the glass. In his heart, he knew the fight for dignity and equality was far from over. But tonight, in his bistro, he had taken a stand. And that, he thought, was a step in the right direction. The events of the evening left an indelible mark not just on Vanessa, but on everyone who witnessed it. Malik walked away stronger, the diners left more thoughtful, and James reaffirmed his belief in the power of decency. Because at the end of the day, kindness isn't just an action. It's a choice that can ripple outward, creating change in the most unexpected ways. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.